that's the deal with that relationship. People say to me, how did you stay so long? And I'm like, well, I was married for 33 years, but 33 years were not bad. You know, maybe 15 of them were bad. But we would have these long stretches where we would do really great together.
Also, there are things that only the two of you know.
That's right.
There are things
that I can't share with you.
Yeah, there are things that only the two of you know. So I actually understand that.
Let's get one thing straight. Hollywood might serve drama, but when it comes to real, unfiltered, jaw-dropping mess, the Knowles family has just reignited a tabloid wildfire that no one saw coming. Because the streets are whispering, no, screaming, that Tina Knowles may be rekindling something with her ex-husband Matthew Knowles. Yes, that Matthew, the same man who publicly humiliated her, the same man who fathered not one, but 2 children outside of their marriage. The betrayal? Legendary. The fallout? Nuclear. And now, after years of silence and carefully curated separation, here they are, allegedly creeping behind the scenes while Tina is still legally married to actor Richard Lawson. Let that sink in, because when this rumor broke, it didn't just cause a ripple, it caused a Category 5 social media storm. Fans, foes, and family insiders alike were gagged. The speculation didn't come out of nowhere. Over the past few months, Tina's been dropping subtle hints online. Cryptic quotes about healing and history, sudden nostalgia posts about family memories from the 90s, and most suspiciously, photos of her and Matthew appearing in the same spaces again. Family events? Red carpet appearances? Private dinners that got just a little too public? The breadcrumbs have been there, and now the narrative is snowballing. Let's remember, this is the same Tina who filed for divorce from Matthew back in 2009 after years of quiet suffering. She held her dignity in public while the tabloids dragged every grimy detail out for the world to consume. Matthew's affairs weren't secrets, they were scandals. He was cheating while managing Beyoncé's career, building Destiny's Child into a powerhouse while tearing his marriage apart behind the scenes. One child out of wedlock was devastating. But when a second came to light, that was the final nail in the coffin. Tina walked away, built a new life, found love again with Richard Lawson, and seemed to finally have her peace. So now why this? Why him? Why now? Some insiders say it's nostalgia. That Tina and Matthew have quietly rebuilt a bond as co-parents and grandparents. Others are less generous. They're calling this a full-blown emotional affair, one that's been brewing ever since her relationship with Richard started showing cracks. And yes, there have been cracks. Sources close to the couple claim Tina and Richard have been living increasingly separate lives, different cities, different projects, and less time together. While Tina was showing up at Knowles family events, Richard was conspicuously absent. Her Instagram wiped any trace of their love story. No anniversary posts, no birthday shoutouts, nothing, just silence, and then slowly, the return of Matthew Knowles in her orbit. The wildest part? Some say Beyoncé's not even mad, that she's been quietly encouraging a truce between her parents for the sake of family unity. But others? They're saying Bey is staying completely out of it, because even she knows this could blow up everything. Tina's team, of course, has said nothing. Matthew's been his usual smug self, posting vague affirmations about growth, healing, and understanding your purpose. He's also been ramping up his public image lately. More interviews, more content, more appearances. Almost like he wants people to see him in a different light, or like he's trying to rehabilitate his image just in time for something big, like, say, a reunion. The question everyone's asking is this a full-circle love story, or a midlife crisis wrapped in old wounds and blurred lines? If the rumors are true, this is more than a rekindling. This is a betrayal rebranded as closure. And if Tina really is inching her way back into Matthew's life while still legally married, we might be watching the quiet collapse of her second marriage, live in real time, all while the world roots for, cringes at, or condemns the return of one of Black Hollywood's most infamous pairings. Because sometimes, no matter how far you run, old flames burn the loudest. At first, it looked like just another quiet Hollywood breakup. No statement, no scandal, no headlines screaming infidelity or betrayal. Just a slow, eerie fade to black. But now, with the dust starting to clear, it turns out Tina Knowles' split from actor Richard Lawson was anything but peaceful. And behind the curtain lies a twist so wild, so messy, it might just rewrite everything we thought we knew about the Knowles family legacy. Because the whispers won't die down. They're growing louder. And the rumor taking center stage is this. Tina's breakup with Richard might not have been caused by the usual drift or distance, but by an alleged emotional, maybe even physical, reconnection with her ex-husband, Matthew Knowles. The very man she once divorced for publicly humiliating her. Yes, him again. Let's rewind. When Tina married Richard Lawson in 2015, it felt like a redemption arc. After surviving years of betrayal and pain from Matthew's affairs, Tina looked radiant. Empowered. She found a man with maturity, warmth, and spiritual depth. Someone who had reportedly been in her orbit for years as a friend before anything romantic ever sparked. They were an older couple defying the Hollywood odds, blending their families and basking in second-chance love. But by late 2022, the cracks were showing. Social media sleuths noticed Tina stopped posting photos of Richard altogether. Public appearances grew sparse. Fans brushed it off as normal couple fatigue, until Tina abruptly changed her name back on Instagram, dropping Lawson like a forgotten hashtag. That's when the real speculation began. And now, with recent reports of her and Matthew appearing at events together, photographed in close proximity, acting unusually comfortable, people are putting two and two together. Could it be that Tina never fully closed the chapter with Matthew? And worse, could her reconnection with him have quietly sabotaged her marriage to Richard? Sources close to the couple say Richard felt the shift, that he saw Tina growing distant, emotionally unavailable, even nostalgic. One insider described it like this. She started romanticizing the past, talking about the early Destiny's Child days, bringing up memories from the 90s, and every memory somehow circled back to Matthew. It didn't help that Richard was allegedly spending more time in LA, focused on his own projects, while Tina was rooted in Houston, immersed in family affairs, and increasingly in Matthew's shadow. The people around her? Divided. Some say Tina was simply revisiting old wounds in an attempt to heal. Others? They're convinced she was already emotionally entangled with Matthew before the papers were even filed. One particularly bold claim from a family acquaintance says Tina and Matthew began reconnecting privately in mid-2023 under the guise of co-parenting and grandparenting, but the boundaries blurred fast. The question everyone keeps asking is, why? Why go back to the very man who dragged your name through public shame? Why circle back to someone who made a fool of you in front of the entire world? Twice? Psychologists might call it trauma bonding. Friends whisper it's about closure. But some insiders say it's something deeper, a desire for legacy. That Tina and Matthew, despite everything, are bound by blood, by history, by an empire they built together. And that perhaps Tina, after years of building a new life, realized she still had unfinished business with the man who gave her both Beyoncé and Solange, and helped mold one of the most powerful dynasties in entertainment. Still, none of that softens the blow for Richard Lawson. People close to him describe a man blindsided, heartbroken, but too proud to make it public. He hasn't spoken a word to the press, but his recent posts have been telling, quotes about loyalty, silence, and betrayal. A man who once glowed beside Tina now looks like someone who lost something priceless and never got the real reason why. But we might know now. And if the rumors are true, then this wasn't just a divorce. It was a love triangle wrapped in decades of betrayal, forgiveness, and questionable choices. Because if Tina really did walk away from a steady, loving marriage just to revisit the ashes of a toxic past with Matthew Knowles, then this isn't just a failed romance. It's a full-blown Shakespearean tragedy set to the soundtrack of Beyoncé's career. And we haven't even seen the final act. Before there was Beyoncé the icon, before Destiny's Child ever hit a note or a stage, there was Tina and Matthew. High school sweethearts turned business partners, turned public scandal, turned heartbreak. 33 years of marriage. 33 years of love. lies, sacrifice, and secrets. And now, as rumors swirl about Tina allegedly rekindling a relationship with a man she once divorced in disgrace, we're forced to revisit what many thought was a closed book. But it wasn't just any marriage. It was a dynasty built brick by brick on Tina's style, Matthew's hustle, and the burning ambition of two daughters whose names now define a generation. But behind the glitz, there was a storm. Let's be real. The cracks in Tina and Matthew's marriage weren't just personal. They were public record. Matthew Knowles wasn't just Tina's husband. He was Beyoncé's manager, Destiny's Child's puppet master, the business mind who turned his daughter into a brand before she could even vote. But with all that power came recklessness. And the receipts are brutal. Infidelity wasn't just a rumor. It was a pattern. By the late 2000s, whispers turned to headlines. Tina filed for divorce in 2009, only to withdraw a year later. A move many now see as emotional whiplash, or worse, manipulation. But by 2011, she filed again, and this time she didn't turn back. Because by then, it was undeniable. Matthew had fathered not one, but at least two children outside their marriage. One with actress Alexandra Wright, resulting in a son. Another with a woman named Takoya Branscombe, another daughter. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was biological. A slap in the face to a woman who had stood by him through every album, every business deal, every late-night studio session. And it didn't stop there. Behind the scenes, industry insiders whispered about Matthew's alleged issues with substances, alcohol, maybe more. Nothing was ever fully confirmed, but those close to the family said his energy shifted. Erratic behavior, poor financial decisions. A man spiraling as his daughter's star continued to rise without him. By 2011, Beyoncé had cut professional ties with her father. And not long after, so did Tina. But here's the part that complicates everything. The moment that keeps people guessing about what Tina really feels. It was 2013, on CBS This Morning, when Tina Knowles sat down with Gayle King. The divorce was finalized. The damage was done. But when Gayle asked Tina about those 33 years of marriage, she didn't rage. She didn't lash out. Instead, she said this. 33 years weren't all bad. A pause, a sigh, and then she added, I look at it as half your life. And why not be positive about it? And that's when the audience saw something unexpected. Nuance. Tina wasn't erasing the pain, but she wasn't erasing the love either. Despite the betrayals, despite the shame, she still acknowledged the bond they shared, the foundation they built, the family they raised. And maybe, just maybe, that's the reason she never fully closed the door on Matthew Knowles. Because what do you do when your first love is also your worst heartbreak? When a man who shattered you is also the man who helped shape your entire world? Do you cut him off forever? Or when the noise dies down and the wounds start to scar, do you start to wonder if there's something left to salvage? Tina's quote didn't go viral. It didn't trend. But in hindsight, it may have been the biggest clue of all. That no matter how far she ran, some part of her never truly left that marriage. And now, with whispers of Matthew creeping back into her life, that quiet little quote hits different. Because maybe those 33 years weren't all bad. Maybe they just weren't all over. Long before he became Mr. Tina Knowles, long before their Malibu wedding on a yacht surrounded by celebrity royalty, Richard Lawson was just the man in the room who couldn't stop looking at her. It was 1981. Tina Knowles, still Tina Beyonce at the time, was a married woman. Her husband, Matthew Knowles, was ambitious, charismatic, and laser-focused on his career. She was pregnant with her second child, a little girl the world would one day know as Beyoncé. Life was moving fast. The marriage was complicated but stable on the surface. And then she met Richard, a rising actor known for his work in Poltergeist and Dynasty. Richard was magnetic, suave, older, worldly. When they crossed paths, it wasn't some wild, scandalous affair. It wasn't even a flirtation. But the chemistry? Unmistakable. Tina would later admit. There was something there. A spark. A pull. One of those cosmic connections you tuck away in the back of your mind because the timing is all wrong. She was pregnant. She was married. She had a life to build. So nothing happened. not on the surface. But beneath the layers of loyalty, motherhood, and respectability politics, a secret thread had been stitched, a quiet what if that would stretch across decades. And Richard? He never pushed, never pried, but he also never disappeared. For years, he was just a friend, a familiar face, the kind of man who shows up at the right time, but never oversteps. He watched Tina become a mother, watched her raise two powerhouse daughters, watched her build House of Duran, watched her suffer, silently, through Matthew's betrayals. And he waited, because when Matthew's infidelities exploded into public view, when the outside children, the lawsuits, and the humiliation became too much, Richard stepped out of the shadows. He wasn't a rebound. He was the backup plan that had matured into a real possibility. A man who'd seen her in her darkest moments and still wanted her. Not as Beyoncé's mother, not as some industry accessory, but as Tina, the woman, the artist, the survivor. In 2015, they married in a breathtaking yacht ceremony, surrounded by family, friends, and oceans of whispered finallys. Tina was 61, Richard was 68, and the world swooned over their late-in-life love story. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because if Richard was the answer to all of Tina's heartbreak, if he was the prize at the end of her storm, why is she allegedly circling back to the man who wrecked it all? Was Richard truly her soulmate, or just the safe harbor while she rebuilt herself? Some say Tina never fully let go of Matthew. That Richard was the right man, but not the first man, and that even after marriage, she struggled to give her whole heart. Others believe the opposite, that Tina and Richard were a true love story, derailed by Matthew's gravitational pull and years of emotional trauma. That she was finally free, and then got spooked by the quiet, the peace, the stability. Because sometimes when you've lived for decades on adrenaline and chaos, love without drama feels unfamiliar, almost unreal. And now that her marriage to Richard has quietly crumbled, no press tour, no scandal, just quiet distance, the old flame with Matthew suddenly makes more sense. Not because it's right, but because it's familiar. Still, the most romantic chapter in Tina's life may not be the one with the biggest headlines. It might be the one that started with a glance in 1981, a moment never forgotten. A man who waited over 30 years for his chance. Richard Lawson wasn't just a second husband. He was the backup heartbeat. And now that he's gone, we're left wondering, did Tina ever truly let him in? Or was she always haunted by the man who came first? While the world watched Beyoncé's parents fall apart in a swirl of baby mamas, divorce papers, and media statements, there is another story brewing behind the scenes. A story that almost nobody was paying attention to until one man started talking. Enter David Brewer, celebrity vocal coach, industry insider, longtime Knowles family associate, and a man who claims he saw way more than he was supposed to. For years, Brewer kept things professional. He coached Beyoncé and Solange. He knew the family dynamics. He was around for Destiny's Child's rise, the early solo years, the power moves. But when Tina filed for divorce from Matthew Knowles, the whispers started. According to Brewer, things between Tina and Richard Lawson didn't just start after Matthew's fall from grace. They were already in motion. He claims he witnessed late-night rendezvous, unexplained closeness, and one kiss too many, well before Tina was legally separated. Not on some messy tabloid tip, but in subtle, coded ways. A lingering glance, a private conversation that went too long, or a convenient overlap in schedules that didn't make sense. He says, there were times I'd come into the studio, and Richard would already be there. Tina would act surprised, but not really. It felt rehearsed, like a cover story. And then came the alleged smoking gun, a kiss. Brewer didn't mince words. I know what I saw. It wasn't on the cheek. It wasn't platonic. It was real. That one moment opened the floodgates for industry whispers. Because if Tina and Richard were creeping before the divorce was finalized, before the paperwork, before the yacht wedding, before the glowing Instagram tributes, then this wasn't a sweet second chance romance. This was a long con. And suddenly, the timeline looks a little messy, eh? Matthew was dragged through the mud for his infidelities, publicly outed for fathering multiple children outside the marriage. But what if Tina wasn't entirely innocent either? What if she'd emotionally checked out long before the public divorce? What if Richard was always in the wings, not just waiting, but warming up? Insiders say it's possible that Tina and Richard maintained a friendship under the guise of professionalism, appearing at events, collaborating on projects, keeping it low. But behind closed doors, things may have crossed the line. Brewer alleges that some of Beyoncé's inner circle knew what was going on, but kept quiet out of respect and to protect the brand. Because imagine the PR nightmare if Beyoncé's mother was caught up in a cheating scandal while Matthew's own mess was still front-page news. The Knowles family has always been about control. Control of the narrative, control of the image, control of the empire. So, naturally, any hint that Tina may have had skeletons of her own? Buried, scrubbed, denied. But secrets don't stay secret forever. And now that Tina and Richard's marriage has ended in eerie silence, no statement, no real closure, just a quiet unfollow and a deleted birthday post. Those whispers are getting louder. Was their whole love story built on a lie? Was Richard really the devoted friend turned husband? Or was he a willing accomplice in an emotional affair that stretched on for years? Brewer's claims have never been legally challenged. He stands by his story. And while some chalk it up to exaggeration or a bid for attention, others in the industry say, he's not lying. He just said it before the rest of us were ready to admit it. So now the question is, was Tina playing the long game? Was Richard always plan B or plan A in disguise? And most haunting of all, if Tina was capable of this kind of deception, how many other stories have we never heard? Let's not sugarcoat it. Matthew Knowles didn't just ruin his marriage, he torched it. And he didn't do it all at once. No, it was death by 1,000 lies, with each betrayal more humiliating than the last. But nothing compared to the final blow. 2 children born outside of his 33-year marriage to Tina Knowles. The man who managed Beyoncé's career with ruthless precision couldn't manage to keep his own house in order. For years, there were whispers. Matthew had always been charismatic, slick, too slick. Industry insiders knew about the flirty behavior, the blurred boundaries, the long meetings that had nothing to do with business. But it wasn't until 2009 that the truth spilled out, messy and undeniable. That year, Alexandra Wright came forward, claiming that Matthew was the father of her unborn child. A paternity test later confirmed it. A baby boy named Nixon, conceived while Tina was still very much married to him. The public humiliation was swift. Tina filed for divorce shortly after the scandal broke. And for a moment, it seemed like that was the end of it. But then came the second child, from a different woman. Takoya Branscombe, a Houston-based real estate agent and former model, also filed a paternity suit against Matthew, and won. Another daughter, born in secret. Another betrayal. Another knife in Tina's back. By that point, the pattern was clear. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a lifestyle, a man who believed he was untouchable, burning through loyalty, trust, and women like they were disposable. And yet, through it all, Beyoncé stayed silent. Publicly, she never addressed the siblings, never welcomed them, never acknowledged them in interviews, songs, or award speeches. Not even a polite deflection, just total erasure, as if they didn't exist. It was deafening. Because Beyoncé is calculated. She doesn't miss a beat. So her silence wasn't accidental. It was intentional. A line in the sand. You betrayed my mother. You betrayed this family. And I'm not looking back. Solange? Same energy. No tweets. No comments. No photos. The Knowles daughters closed ranks around Tina, and Matthew is out. Sources close to the family say that the second baby was the final straw. Tina had stuck it out through so much, whispers, allegations, late-night disappearances. But that second child proved what many feared. This wasn't about lust, it was about disregard. He didn't just cheat. He created legacies outside the marriage. He wasn't just a husband who made a mistake. He was a man who couldn't stop himself from destroying everything he built. And the irony? Matthew Knowles helped shape one of the most tightly controlled public images in entertainment history. Beyoncé's brand, is discipline, precision, respectability. But behind the curtain, her father was writing a cautionary tale in real time. Now, those outside children are growing up. They know who their half-sister is. They see her on stage. They hear her voice everywhere. And yet, they live on the fringes of a dynasty they were never invited into. And Matthew? He's faded into the background, making headlines only when he's selling his share of Beyoncé's early catalog or trying to stay relevant with a book deal or business seminar. But the damage is already done. His legacy isn't just the father of superstar. It's the man who blew up his family for a moment of pleasure and lost everything. Because in the end, it wasn't Tina walking away that destroyed the Knowles household. It was Matthew's pattern of destruction. Some love stories are whirlwind romances. Others are slow burns. But then there's Richard Lawson and Tina Knowles, a saga so long, so perfectly timed, that it starts to look less like fate and more like a chess game. Let's rewind to 1981. Tina Knowles was glowing, pregnant with her second child, Solange, and very much married to Matthew Knowles. That same year, she met Richard Lawson on the set of a fashion project. He was suave, rising in Hollywood, and instantly captivated. Yes, while Tina was still carrying Beyoncé's little sister, Richard was already eyeing the queen. He once said in an interview that he was intrigued from the beginning, and for the next 3 decades, he stayed that way. Through Tina's public highs and private lows, through the Grammy wins, the cheating scandals, the devastating divorce, Richard was always there. Quiet, respectful, patient. But here's where things get murky. Their official relationship didn't begin until 2013. That's 4 years after Tina finally divorced Matthew, and just months after Matthew remarried. Yes, let that sink in. Tina stayed single for years, through heartbreak, through shame, through healing. But suddenly, when Matthew Knowles ties the knot with a much younger woman, Tina is suddenly red carpet official with Richard Lawson. That's not coincidence. That's timing with teeth. They married in 2015 in a glamorous all-white yacht ceremony in Newport Beach. Beyoncé, Jay-Z, Solange, they were all there. It was positioned as a healing moment, a fairy tale ending. But insiders weren't so convinced. Because here's the thing. Did Tina ever really get over Matthew? The man who built a career beside her, raised children with her, lied to her, yes, but also shaped her entire adult life. Was Richard truly the love of her life, or was he the optics of a comeback? Even friends noticed the odd vibe. Richard was all in, publicly gushing, constantly praising Tina, sharing old stories about their years of platonic closeness. But Tina? She seemed measured, almost careful, like a woman performing happiness. Or like someone trying to show her ex, look what you gave up. And then came the interviews. Tina would talk about how they'd known each other for decades, how the timing was finally right. But there was always a shadow behind her smile, a sense that this wasn't just about falling in love. It was about reclaiming power, reclaiming dignity, making Matthew Knowles see that she wasn't broken, wasn't abandoned, she was adored. Except revenge love doesn't always age well. Because behind every perfect Instagram post, behind the family out photos and blended holiday dinners, there were whispers. Tina was guarded. Richard was more invested than she was. And now, nearly a decade later, their recent split seems to confirm what the streets suspected all along. Richard may have won the girl, but he never truly won her heart. He waited 32 years for the woman of his dreams. But did Tina ever stop dreaming about someone else? Was she in love with Richard Lawson, or just in love with the idea of not losing? At first glance, Tina Knowles and Richard Lawson looked like a second chance at love. But behind the filters, designer gowns, and picture-perfect yacht wedding was a marriage built on uneven ground. Because love doesn't erase history. And Tina Knowles? She came into this marriage with emotional scars still bleeding beneath the surface. Let's be honest. After 33 years with Matthew Knowles, a man who cheated, fathered 2 children outside the marriage, and wrecked the family foundation she'd spent decades building, Tina wasn't just divorced. She was damaged. And when she found herself suddenly free after decades of loyalty, she wasn't necessarily ready to love again. She was ready to feel wanted. And Richard Lawson? He was ready. He'd been waiting in the wings since 1981, romanticizing Tina for over 3 decades. But that kind of patience can be a double-edged sword. Because when you idolize someone for that long, you don't marry the person, they marry your fantasy. And slowly, that fantasy started to crack. Sources close to the couple say Richard struggled with Tina's emotional distance. She was loving, yes, but guarded always. She could laugh with him, vacation with him, attend galas and fundraisers, but she rarely opened up. Not fully. There were parts of her still stuck in the shadows of her first marriage. Triggers she hadn't unpacked. Pain she'd pressed down for so long, it calcified. And Richard? He began to feel like a placeholder. He wasn't Matthew, but somehow, he was still competing with him. Competing with 33 years of shared history. With the father of her children. With a man she claimed to be done with, but never quite seemed free from. Especially when old friends whispered about phone calls, emails, and a strange emotional tether that never fully severed. Richard also reportedly struggled with the public dynamic. Tina was still Miss Tina, Beyoncé's stylish, no-nonsense mother, forever connected to the Knowles brand. Meanwhile, Richard felt more like an accessory than a partner. A supportive husband in the background of a woman still partially living in her past. And let's not forget, he had his own baggage too. A tragic past with the loss of his daughter, his own failed marriage, and the pressure of stepping into a family empire where the spotlight never dims. Eventually, love turned into labor. Emotional intimacy turned into emotional exhaustion. And that second marriage, so picture-perfect on the outside, started to rot from within. Because this wasn't a clean slate. This was a rebound wrapped in hope, a relationship trying to outrun trauma, but dragging it like an anchor. Tina had survived betrayal, public humiliation, and a messy divorce. But what she hadn't done was heal. And healing isn't glamorous. It's not about weddings and red carpets. It's ugly cries, therapy sessions, uncomfortable truths. And she may have skipped those steps, jumping straight into the arms of a man who loved her, but couldn't fix her. So the question becomes, was Tina ever truly ready for a second marriage? Or was she just trying to rewrite the ending of a painful first one? Just when everyone thought the Tina Matthews saga was over, it wasn't. Because according to multiple sources close to the Knowles circle, the story didn't end with divorce papers and separate houses. In fact, it may have just been paused. And now, the whispers are getting louder. Tina Knowles and Matthew Knowles allegedly reignited their affair, while she was still married to Richard Lawson. Let that sink in. Not only is this a potential betrayal of Richard's trust, but it's also a shocking full-circle twist, a return to the very man who tore her down. But here's the thing. Emotional ties don't always snap clean. Especially when you've spent over 3 decades building a life, a family, and a name with someone. Matthew Knowles wasn't just her ex. He was her first, her empire partner, the man she built Beyoncé and Solange's universe with. And as much as Tina tried to move on, she may have never really let go. Sources claim the communication between Tina and Matthew never fully stopped. Co-parenting turned into check-ins. Check-ins turned into private lunches, and those private lunches allegedly turned into something more. And it wasn't just emotional intimacy rekindling. It was physical. One vocal coach who worked with the Knowles family swears she witnessed subtle shifts in their body language. Lingering touches, knowing glances, inside jokes that only longtime lovers share. These weren't just friendly exes. These were 2 people playing with fire. Meanwhile, Richard Lawson, already feeling the strain of being compared to a ghost, was reportedly blindsided. He believed he was healing Tina's wounds, but she may have still been bleeding for Matthew. And the public? They never saw it coming. Because for years, Tina had rebranded herself as the graceful survivor, the classy matriarch who rose from betrayal and found peace. But what if that peace was a facade? What if she was always emotionally tethered to Matthew, even while legally bound to another man? Let's not forget, Tina once said in her Gayle King interview, 33 years weren't all bad. And maybe she wasn't just reminiscing. Maybe she was revealing a truth she couldn't shake. that as toxic, hurtful, and humiliating as Matthew was, he also represented home, familiarity, first love, power. And sometimes, even smart, capable women get caught in cycles they can't escape. So the affair rumors beg the ultimate question. Did Tina ever really leave Matthew Knowles? Or did she just find a way to keep him close, out of the spotlight, but never out of her heart or her bed? And if that's true, what does that say about the woman we thought had finally reclaimed her story? Because maybe this isn't just a messy entanglement. Maybe it's a loop she never really wanted to break. The Knowles family has long been seen as a dynasty of resilience, reinvention, and female empowerment. At the center of it all, Tina Knowles, the matriarch, the survivor, the woman who stood tall after public betrayal and walked into a second marriage with grace. She was the blueprint for bouncing back. But now, as rumors swirl about her alleged rekindled affair with Matthew Knowles, even while still married to Richard Lawson, the narrative is starting to crack. Because here's the irony no one can ignore. The woman who raised the architect of Lemonade may have been pouring her own sugar into a bitter pot all along. Let's not forget what Lemonade represented: a global anthem of betrayal, rage, and reclamation. Beyoncé gave the world a cultural manifesto for Black womanhood, infidelity, and forgiveness, with her mother, Tina, right there by her side as living proof that you can leave and still win. But now, with Tina allegedly stepping back into the same storm she once escaped, the message gets complicated. Did Tina ever truly escape Matthew? Or did she just learn to hide the thunder? And if the rumors are true, that she returned to the man who had multiple children outside their marriage, publicly embarrassed her, and sent her into the arms of a second husband, then what does that mean for the very legacy she helped craft? This isn't just tabloid fodder. This is about the weight of generational storytelling. Because if Beyoncé channeled her mother's pain to fuel Lemonade, and if Tina never really broke free from that pain, were they healing each other, or just reenacting the same heartbreak on different stages? The parallels are haunting. Both women loved powerful men. Both endured public betrayals. Both turned their wounds into art or armor. But now it's hard not to ask, are they truly bonded by healing, or trapped by a pattern neither one of them could outrun? And for fans who saw the Knowles women as symbols of strength, this twist threatens to shatter that image. Not because it's wrong to forgive, but because it raises a deeper, messier question. Is it empowerment if you keep going back? Or is it just romanticized survival? Tina Knowles may have raised a global icon, but now she's facing the glare of her own choices, ones that may rewrite everything we thought we understood about the Knowles women. Because maybe the most scandalous truth of all isn't what Matthew did. It's that Tina may have never stopped loving him anyway. And that truth, that's what lingers. In the family photos, in the silences, in every flawless image that suddenly feels a little too polished. And the Knowles legacy, once so clear, so strong, so unshakable, now feels like it's haunted by its own reflection.